Welcome to the show today. I'm very pleased to have Arun Gandhi with me. He is the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi. And welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on the show.
I'm very pleased. Let's start with the Educational Institute, the Worldwide Institute that you're the president of.
Yes, I started this in 2007. Initially to commemorate my wife's memory. She died in 2007. And also, we had this in mind for a long time because we saw a lot of poor children in India who were so trapped in the poverty that they couldn't get out of it. For generations, they just lived in poverty and died in poverty. And so we thought that if we start an educational program on the basis of my grandfather's teachings, that we might be able to give them some hope in life. So we have a school now, and we have about 160 children who are attending, and they come from absolutely poor background. And we hope someday to be able to build a bigger premises so that we can take in a little more. And of course the Gandhi Worldwide Education Institute has a very ambitious program that if this succeeds, then we should have similar schools in other parts of the world also where there's a lot of poverty and destitution. But that's a long-term project. I don't think it will ever take off. We'll be very glad if this one school settles and takes root.
Right, it is difficult to get something started.
Right.
I noticed the website you have is very interactive. It has a good fundraising tool on it. How have you found that the web and other technologies are helping you get started?
Well, it's helping us spread the message very well, but it hasn't quite helped us get the funding that we need. The funding part of it is slow, and I don't know whether it's because of the economy and all the hardships here, or whether we are not making the right approach, or what it is, I don't know.
Let's step back in time. I remember a page from history relating to your grandfather, Mahatma Gandhi. In 1930, he led the Salt March. It's a famous moment in history where they were proclaiming civil disobedience against the colonization of their country and the salt, of course, the taxes. It makes me think that that page from history became the world focused on it at the time because of journalists who were able to take pictures and were able to bring film back to the Americas and to Europe. Almost like today, we would think of it as a social media campaign.
Exactly.
And so I'm thinking, what would your grandfather do today if he had a Facebook fan page? What do you think he would be doing with social media?
Well, I think he was a great media person. During his lifetime, he edited nearly 3 or 4 weekly papers, so he believed in the media, and I think he would have used the current media effectively to spread the message in the world.
What would be your wish list if we could use social media more to involve young people today in the nonviolence movement or peace activism? What would be your wish list of what we could do with that?
Well, I was hoping that the social media would channel the young people's interest and ideas into something more positive. But so far, I think it's probably because this whole social media thing is so new, and they're still trying to get their feet. Peace for most people seems to be the absence of war or the absence of violence in society. And once we are able to put an end to the war and fighting and all that, we think that we have attained peace. But actually, if we look deeper into the violence that we all commit, there is a lot of passive violence that we commit all the time, consciously and unconsciously, because our whole lifestyle is based on a culture of violence. And that passive violence is the fuel that ignites physical violence. So logically, if we want to put an end to the physical violence, we have to cut off the fuel supply.
The source, yeah.
And since the fuel supply comes from each one of us, we have to become the change we wish to see in the world. If we don't transform ourselves and our attitudes and our relationships and our life, we are never going to be able to attain peace.
That's a profound question or concept there. I remember in preparing for this interview, I thought a little bit about the young generation today. They have a sense of entitlement, which is not the passive violence that you're speaking of, but it's I think related. Because they have these feelings that society works a certain way. They feel the general sense of peace. They don't know really what war is about. And so it's a relative sense of peace, and yet they expect also these things to come to them in society. That, I think, creates ignorance of the way the rest of the world is.
I mean, you know, there are so many things that we do every day that we don't even regard as violent. But wasting food or wasting resources or overconsumption of resources or things that we do in our society, we have so much of it, we don't know what to do. For instance, I read the other day that nearly 50% of the fruits and vegetables we grow in our country is thrown away because it doesn't look good.
Look good.
Yeah.
It's not even spoiled.
It doesn't look good. The shape is not right. The color is not right. So we just throw that away. 50% of the production is gone down the drain.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And yet there's so much of starvation. In this country itself, 1 million or more people go hungry to bed every night.
I know that some people are beginning to think about these wasteful ways. Yeah. I know that there is a company that collects leftover soap from hotels and actually repackages it and sends it to Africa where they have no soap at all, just to help people have a more hygiene over there.
We need to do more of this. We need to, and everybody, all of us need to do it, not just one or two groups of people doing these things. I think all of us need to do it, even in a small way. Whatever we can do, we must do to make a difference in the world.
Very good. Well, a local peace studies teacher, Elizabeth Solis, asked me to ask you about a personal memory that you remember from your grandfather, something you learned from him.
Well, there are lots of things that I learned from him, but one that is very relevant to what we had just discussed is about one day when I was coming back from school and I happened to have a little 3-inch butt of a pencil in my hand, and I thought it was too small for me to use, and so without a second thought I just threw the pencil away. Because I was so sure that grandfather would give me a new pencil when I asked him. But that evening when I asked him for a new pencil, instead of giving me one, he subjected me to a lot of questions. He wanted to know why I threw the pencil and how small it had become and why couldn't I use it, and on, until he told me to go out and look for it. And I said, you must be kidding. You don't expect me to look for a little pencil in the dark. He said, oh yes, there's a flashlight. Take this and go out and look for the pencil. And I must have spent about 2 hours searching for the pencil. When I finally found it and brought it to him, he said, now I want you to sit here and learn 2 very important lessons. The first lesson is that even in the making of a simple thing like a pencil, we use a lot of the world's natural resources. And when we throw them away, we are throwing away the world's natural resources. And that is violence against nature. And the second lesson is that because in an affluent society we can afford to buy all these things in bulk, we overconsume the resources of the world, and because we overconsume them, we are depriving people elsewhere of these resources, and they have to live in poverty. And that is violence against humanity. And that was the first time I realized that all of these little things that we do every day, consciously and unconsciously, that all of that adds up to violence in society. To make me understand this lesson thoroughly, he made me draw a family tree of violence. just as we do a genealogical tree with violence as the grandparent and physical violence and passive violence as the two branches. And every day I had to examine everything I had experienced during the day and put them down on that tree in their appropriate places. If it was physical violence where we use physical force against one another, that would go under physical violence. But if it was a kind of violence where we don't use any physical force, and yet we hurt people, directly or indirectly, consciously or unconsciously. Sometimes we may hurt people in another country without even knowing it, because of our lifestyle or because of the way we consume things. So all of these things would be passive violence. And when I began to do this introspection, it was a form of introspection. I was amazed that I was able to fill up the whole wall in my room with acts of passive violence.
He helped you expand your mind into seeing all of these types of actions.
Right. Now, all the things that I had not even thought of as being violent came out there on that tree. And when I saw that, then he explained to me the connection between the two. He said, we commit passive violence all the time, every day. And that generates anger in the victim. And the victim then resorts to physical violence to get justice. So it is passive violence that fuels the fire of physical violence. So logically, if we want to put out that fire, we have to become the change.
We have
I
to
think
become
that
the
was
change.
the really profound lesson that I learned from him. There are many others too, but I'll be speaking about them tonight.
Right, very good. I remember something I learned from him was his belief system. It's Sarvodaya, and how he was inspired on a train ride. He was reading a book by John Ruskin. And it took him, I think, a few years before he coined the term Sarvodaya.
Yeah.
But tell me about that belief system today.
Well, it is part of his philosophy. Sarvodaya means the welfare of all, and that we have to expand our concept. Today, because of the materialistic lifestyle that we enjoy, we have become very selfish and greedy and self-centered. We think about ourselves first and then anybody else. And he says, no, we must expand our concept and we must think about other people as much as we think about ourselves, and learn to share and help other people come up in life. And if we could all do that as individuals and as nations, we will stop exploiting each other and start cooperating with each other and living a much more happy lifestyle.
I think it's a very interesting belief system. I know a lot of people today are discovering for the first time Buddhism and Hinduism, and this is similar to that. It has similarities. One other question I have going back to technology is, do you think technology today is helping us become more interconnected or less? Some people.
Well, it has the potential of making us more interconnected. But again, what is happening is it's connecting only the rich and the educated people. But half of the world is uneducated and living in such tremendous poverty that they are not being connected at all. We are forgetting them, we are marginalizing them.
They can't touch the technology, they don't have it yet.
They don't have it, they don't know it, even basic education they have not had yet. So we are sidelining them and creating two different worlds.
I think that sometimes we forget about the poor around the world, because we hear these fantastic numbers, such as there's so many millions or billions of cell phones in use today.
Right.
It sounds like almost one for each person on the planet, and yet it's not.
No.
A great portion of the planet is still very poor and unable to have one. I see. Finally, can you tell us, if we want to educate ourselves more about the peace movement and about your institute, where can we go on the web to find validated sources of information?
Well, the Gandhi Institute for Nonviolence has a website, You can get a lot of information there. The GandhiForChildren.org is my website. You can see a lot of information. Then my personal website, arungandhi.net and arungandhi.org, also have a lot of information.
Very good. Well, we'll make sure and put those in the video description of this video on YouTube so people can click there and visit your website.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you very much today for your time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show.
Speaking about these things, and we'll look at, we're going to see your keynote speech later tonight.
Okay.
Very good. Well, thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this video, please share on social media or look for the companion article.